So what makes me cranky about Wonder Woman? Emails. Are we going to have to watch Wonder Woman looking at her email every time she's in one of these movies? Is Justice League going to start with Diana opening an email from Bruce saying, "Hey, we need to unite the League. Best, Bruce." Is it really that hard to get Affleck to come in for a couple of minutes so the two people can actually talk to each other? Suicide Squad did it and was the best part of that movie. And as we've seen from Marvel, that kind of quick cameo really helps a universe feel connected. Typing up a note to Bruce just feels cheap by comparison. Anyway, what really makes me cranky about Wonder Woman is just that discussing Wonder Woman is now a hot-button political issue. As I said on Twitter, I wish this movie had come out 20 years ago before the social justice brigade turned every piece of entertainment into a civil rights issue. It's bad enough when fanboys go to war over this stuff, now we gotta add politics too, which inevitably clouds every review, just like it did with the female Ghostbusters. Some people are gonna want to give it a pass on its failings because rah-rah feminism, while other people are gonna want to rip it apart just to spite or otherwise balance out those people. For my part, I'm just gonna give it to you straight, and the straight truth about Wonder Woman is, it's okay. It's an average movie. It does nothing especially well, but it's still leagues above the previous female superhero movies like Catwoman and Elektra, and yes, it is easily the best of the DCEU movies to date. But that's a really low bar to clear, and after stellar flicks like Captain America Winter Soldier, Deadpool, Lego Batman, and most recently Logan, it's hard to look at this movie as anything other than the only passing grade in a universe full of failboats. Now, obviously, if you really love this character, you're probably going to enjoy this movie a lot more than I did, just because this is the first time you get to see her on the big screen this way. Seeing as I have no real feelings towards her one way or the other, that doesn't really do anything for me, but unlike the Man of Lead, the Martha's Boy that he fought, and the 2.5 people making up some kind of Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman at least seems to understand the character and have a story to tell about her. She has an actual arc, she doesn't spend the whole movie moping around, and she's pretty likable overall. And the movie actually made me laugh. Yes, it has jokes, comedic timing even. It's almost entirely on Chris Pine's shoulders, but he knocks it out of the park every time. Wonder Woman even wants to be a hero and tries to save innocent people. It's almost as if director Patty Jenkins actually likes these characters and wants us to like them too. Weird, huh? Speaking of Pine, he's really the standout of the film. Kind of steals it from Gal Gadot, in fact, and it makes me really cranky to once again be reminded how great a Starfleet captain he could have been if they hadn't written New Kirk to be such a total douchebag. The two of them have good chemistry together, and that's when Gadot shines brightest. The fish-out-of-water bits they have together are clever, and just as good as when Thor came to Earth for the first time. Even the supporting cast are fun to have around in one way or another, although I don't think they got as much screen time as they really needed. Which brings me to the first of the two really big problems from which this movie suffers. The pacing sucks. And that's because it's kind of trying to be two origin stories at the same time. We waste an inordinate amount of time on Themyscira doing an abridged coming-of-age story, and then we switch over to the whole Diana goes to man's world, has wacky fish-out-of-water hijinks, and learns people kind of suck thing. Both of these stories suffer for it, but since the Themyscira part is the shorter part, I think they would have done well to chop out all of the bad child acting and start right with the older Diana and Steve's arrival. Then we could have spent more time with them and the little cast of misfits they befriend over the course of the movie instead of listening to exposition and setting up characters that have no bearing on the rest of the story. It also would have given the climax so much more weight since it would have felt like these characters had spent more than 15 minutes together so that you could buy they really bonded before the inevitable big fight starts. That brings me to big problem number 2, the action sequences. Ironically enough for the DCU, it's the action sequences in Wonder Woman that are actually the weakest parts of the film. It's extremely repetitive both in how it's shot and what is actually happening, and it constantly undercuts its own momentum by overusing slow motion. It's like 300 on steroids. So much of the action is somebody just starting a motion, going to slow-mo, and then cutting to the results of that action. Like an Amazon will jump in the air, slow motion, start to fire an arrow, and then we'll cut to the guy with arrows in his chest. I hate to say it, but this movie could have used more Zack Snyder because he's kind of perfected that ramping technique at this point and knows how to use it better. There are only 2 really standout action moments, one especially awesome one involving the lasso, and the rest of it is just Diana stands there holding her shield, Diana blocks a bullet in slow motion with her gauntlets, Diana jumps in slow motion in a direction, Diana breaks something in slow motion. It's like their only answer to how can we make this action sequence clear to the audience was, I know, put everything in slow motion. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can at least follow it, it's not like it's full of shaky cam or hyper editing or that kind of stuff, but it is kind of lifeless. And Diana's also effectively invincible like Superman, so there's never any sense of danger. Even when the big bad finally arrives for the inevitable super throwdown, it's just kind of like, can she even be hurt by this thing? They make that more about Diana's emotional struggle than straight out punching some invincible thing to death, which was a smart choice to get around the invulnerability issue. But it's also where the concerns about Gal Gadot's ability to carry this movie are somewhat realized. She has to convey a lot of complex competing emotions during that part of the film, but she just didn't sell it to me. She's great in the rest of the movie, so this may be a directing or an editing thing, but the bottom line is I wasn't feeling it. So when you get right down to it, the best way I think I can score this movie is to say it's kind of like a mid to low tier Marvel movie. Enjoyable enough, but not one that I'd make it a point to watch again. It's kind of like crossing Thor with Captain America the First Avenger. If this had been our actual introduction to the DCU as opposed to just its chronological beginning, I think it would have been a decent start. It's not something that I think can salvage the sinking ship, particularly if Justice League turns out to be a mess, but I won't dissuade anyone from paying full price to see it. Unless you hate that guitar theme from Batman vs. Superman, since you'll hear that quite a few times, and that could knock off a few points to put it back into matinee territory. In any case, like your Thors and Ant-Mans, Wonder Woman is a decent time at the theater, and a reasonably good introduction for the character despite a weak-sauce villain and the other problems I mentioned. And for those wondering, it does largely leave its politics at the door, so no Mary Sue's humiliating the dumbass menfolk with this one, and that's always a plus. That's what I thought about Wonder Woman anyway. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed the review, and if you want more heroic attempts to tackle controversial films, hit that subscribe button and help me grow my channel.